Come to order, Legislative Audit Commission. Members and members of the public that are here, we may have a couple disruptions during the meeting because Representative Liebling, we're trying to connect via phone so she could participate. That may happen in about 10 minutes. And then today is my birthday, and I will have...
We will not sing. I should.
Yeah, as long as I don't have to sing.
Oh, okay.
And I will, I'm probably going to have to take off because we're celebrating by having the washing machine repairman come in a period somewhere between 10 and 3 o'clock. So I may have to run quickly. So with that, Ms. Randall, if you want to start.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. For the record, my name is Judy Randall. I'm the Deputy Legislative Auditor for OLA's Program Evaluation Division. Let me start by wishing you a happy birthday, Mr. Chair, and noting that you celebrate your birthdays pretty much the way I do, so I'm sorry for you. Also, I wanted to thank all members for their flexibility with the schedule. We had initially scheduled this hearing for Wednesday afternoon, but then the Senate was called into session and we had a conflict. So thanks to everybody for adjusting their schedules. We are pleased to be here today to discuss our evaluation of the Office of Minnesota Information Technology Services, better known by all of us, I think, as MNIT. 2 weeks ago, we were together talking about MNLARS and all the problems related to MNLARS. And I think it's really important to just set the stage and note that the problems associated with MNLARS are not a referendum on IT consolidation in Minnesota. And I think it's really important to state that clearly and upfront. As you know, MNLARS was authorized by the legislature. That whole process started in 2008. And the legislature authorized consolidation of IT services beginning in 2011. So I think it's important for us to separate those. So the legislature passed the Act consolidating IT services in 2011, but IT consolidation is still something that's underway today. It is not yet complete. Some things like IT security are relatively consolidated. But other aspects of MNIT services, especially things like the development of big software projects, those are not yet fully consolidated into MNIT. And Mr. Alter will talk through kind of what has been consolidated, what hasn't been consolidated, and what that means for the state when he gets into his presentation. I want to note that another thing that's not consolidated is the legislature's oversight of information technology services in the state. As we discussed the last time we met, the way IT projects get funded right now in the state is that they go to different committees depending on what agency they're going to support. So a transportation IT project would go to the Transportation Committee. Something helping DHS would go to the HHS committees. There is not one central place for the legislature to review and consider all things IT. IT expenditures, IT policies and standards, broad scale investments in IT that the state wants to make. You all don't have centralized, consolidated, frankly, I would say really very effective oversight of IT right now in the state. And we think that strong legislative oversight of IT is important. We spend a lot of money on IT in the state, and we need to have strong oversight of it. So in our report, we have recommendations and suggestions, not only for MNIT to help them improve their oversight, but also for the legislature to help you all improve your oversight of IT. With that, I'd like to turn to Mr. Alter now, who was the evaluation manager of this evaluation, to provide you many more of the details related to our findings and recommendations. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Alter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. For the record, my name is Joel Alter. I'm the Director of Special Reviews for the office and manage this evaluation. And I also want to acknowledge over to the side here the other staff who worked on the project, Caitlin Badger and Caitlin Zanoni. Before getting to the detailed findings in the report, let me just highlight several conclusions that Ms. Randall just touched on. As we say in this report, the state's consolidation of IT services has been going on for many years, even well before the 2011 consolidation legislation. And we found that the consolidation of IT services and finances is not complete today in 2019. Second, we spent considerable time soliciting and considering the views of MNIT's primary customers, state agencies. We found that those agencies have mixed views about MNIT's performance. And third, there are things over which the legislature has direct control that we think need attention. The statutes that provide the foundation for MNIT deserve close review. In addition, as Ms. Randall said, the legislature's own oversight of government IT has been fragmented. I'd like to begin with a little bit of background on MNIT. State law specifies a wide range of services and equipment that MNIT is directed to oversee, as shown on this slide. And as you can see from the list, MNIT is responsible for a variety of types of computers, servers, networks, software, and MNIT is also responsible for providing certain supporting services such as help desks and periodic maintenance and upgrade of the specified hardware and software on this list. MNIT is a large state agency. As of mid-2018, it had more than 2,300 employees, but much of MNIT's work is conducted inside other state agencies. A majority of MNIT's employees are scattered throughout state government. For example, as you can see here, there are more than 700 staff, that is about a third of MNIT's employees, that are based in a single agency, the Department of Human Services. 43% are based at other state agencies, and about a quarter of MNIT's employees work for the MNIT central office. It's useful to remind ourselves that state government IT accounts for a large amount of state spending. The spending on behalf of state agencies for IT-related hardware, software, contracts, and employees totaled more than $500 million in each of the last 2 years. The amount of IT spending is driven considerably by legislative appropriations to state agencies. Although MNIT oversees IT spending, individual state agencies have a lot of latitude regarding which IT projects they decide to pursue. Nearly all of MNIT's revenues come from the agencies it serves, either in the form of a payment for services received or transfers of appropriations. In fiscal year 2018, 99% of MNIT's revenues came from agencies. And because MNIT is almost entirely dependent on what could be called billable services, that places some constraints on MNIT's ability to undertake tasks that cannot be billed to agencies. Also, I want to point out that there is a time lag when MNIT provides services and when it receives payment for those services. Some of that time lag is natural anytime you have a billing process. Other parts of the time lag reflect that occasionally agencies are tardy in making payments. In any event, the Department of Management and Budget has provided to MNIT a loan each biennium. In the current biennium, it's a $110 million loan to help MNIT cover costs while it's waiting to receive payments. MNIT's revenues, aside from what it receives from agencies, are a small fraction of the total revenue picture. Those revenues consist mainly of state appropriations, about $2.5 million in fiscal 18, and that's mainly to cover central office costs. Also, MNIT received about $2.3 million in fiscal 2018 for the so-called Odyssey Fund. Audit Commission members will recall that we issued a report on the Odyssey Fund last year, and by law, state agencies can transfer unspent appropriations to the Odyssey Fund to be used for future IT projects. MNIT exists in its current form because of legislation in 2011 that required consolidation of state government IT resources. And what do we mean by consolidation? Well, it means that IT employees in state government work for one agency, not a whole lot of different agencies. In addition, consolidation typically involves a certain amount of centralization by the consolidated agency. That is, providing central oversight of expenditures or purchases, or being either the central provider or arranger of certain common services. For context, I think it's worth noting that there has been a general trend among state governments in the U.S. toward consolidation and centralization of IT services, although the extent of that consolidation varies among states. In Minnesota, the legislative initiative in 2011 to consolidate state IT had sponsors in both parties. The 2011 legislation did not create a new agency. Rather, it provided additional authority to an existing agency the Office of Enterprise Technology, which was later renamed MNIT. The legislature did not provide MNIT with additional funding to implement the consolidation. Rather, there was an expectation, at least among some legislators, that additional consolidation activities could be funded with cost savings achieved after the consolidation.
Mr. Alter, we have Representative Liebling joining us, and we need to. Representative Liebling, are you there?
I am. Thank you very much for arranging the phone call in.
Great. We were just going through the report. I had a question for Mr. Alter. My memory may be a little foggy, but I believe that the enabling legislation in the House, at least, was a floor amendment that was a voice vote and was in the
Mr.
House.
Chair, and there were so many things happening in 2011. Of course, we had a special session in 2011. There was legislation, and now I'm trying to remember, that passed during the regular part of the session, and there was a roll, at least there's a record in the state register or in the legislative register of the vote, and it was a fairly overwhelming vote. I think it was 116 to whatever. But then ultimately what the legislation that passed was during the special session. So there were a lot of things going on, and there were certain things on which legislators took votes, and by the time we got to the special session, it was rolled in with various other topics, and so it's a little bit harder to judge kind of what people were voting for or not voting for.
Proceed.
I want to talk next about the status of the consolidation. I know at times during our evaluation, we heard some people from MNIT say, the consolidation is done. But, I think a strong message we want to provide to you today is that the consolidation is not done. And I think it's important to talk about that in different areas. The first area, the consolidation of state employees, I think is the most clear cut. MNIT was directed in law to transition IT employees that were previously employed by state agencies to MNIT. Nearly all of those staff have in fact become MNIT employees. MNIT also rewrote job classifications and position descriptions to bring more consistency to the work done by those staff. Second, MNIT was directed by the 2011 legislation to have control over all IT spending in agencies subject to consolidation. MNIT adopted a phased approach to taking responsibility for the oversight of both payroll and non-payroll expenses in agencies. And that transition has been completed except for one very large piece. Non-payroll expenses at the Department of Human Services are fully under the control of that department. DHS has been reluctant to turn that responsibility over to MNIT, and MNIT, frankly, has not really forced that issue. DHS's non-payroll IT expenses are large. They account, in 2018, they were about 19% of all IT expenditures in state government. Without DHS's IT expenditures being consolidated, it's harder for MNIT, it's frankly harder for our office, and it's harder for legislative staff to aggregate and analyze the full picture of IT spending. And also, without having that full consolidation, it could potentially impede MNIT's ability to do things like bulk purchasing. Third, MNIT has used a phased approach to centralize delivery of various IT services that agencies have in common. But there are still a number of agencies, including some large ones, that are still what MNIT calls future wave agencies, and these agencies do not yet have access to, for example, centralized servers and data storage. And as we'll discuss shortly, MNIT has also taken a very limited approach thus far to centralize oversight of agency software projects. So on the service aspect of consolidation, there's a lot of work yet to be done. In terms of what the consolidation has achieved, we offer some broad observations in the report, but in some cases, it's hard to be definitive. Based on what we've seen, we think the consolidation has positioned the state to better address, through centralized services, the threats to state government's data security that have increased in recent years. In addition, MNIT has reduced state government's number of what are called data centers, that is, the places where agencies store data. That was one of the goals of the consolidation that was identified by the bill authors in 2011, both for security and for efficiency purposes. With consolidation, the state is in a better position to take advantage of both purchases and other economies of scale, and we've seen some evidence that that has occurred. Has the consolidation improved the overall efficiency of state government IT spending? That's unclear. There was not reliable data before the consolidation on IT spending, and as noted previously, there are a lot of reasons why IT spending in general fluctuates up and down depending on what projects are being done at a given time. Overall, state agencies are ambivalent about the consolidation. We did a survey of agencies that were subject to consolidation, and we asked agency officials what their experience has been. And officials in the cabinet agencies, which tend to be larger than the non-cabinet agencies, were a little more positive than negative about the consolidation. The blue colors that you can see on your slide handouts or on the slides that are on the screen show positive responses. The orange colors show negative responses. And officials in non-cabinet agencies tended to be more negative. A couple of other challenges to continued consolidation. First, while IT employees have, as we said, transferred from various state agencies to MNIT, some of those employees have retained a certain allegiance to the agencies that they used to work for. And second, we noted that MNIT has reduced the number of data centers that exist in the state, but it hasn't gotten down to the level that it would like to be at. And MNIT has suggested that making further progress on that issue, as well as certain other centralization aspects, might require additional resources. We also observed that the 2011 legislature was not crystal clear regarding which agencies should be subject to the IT consolidation. The legislation explicitly excluded a small number of agencies from the consolidation, but it otherwise referred to state agencies generically, without definition, when it talked about which agencies would be subject to consolidation. MNIT subsequently adopted a policy that stated which agencies would be included in the consolidation and which would not. MNIT excluded a number of agencies, and we highlight a few of them on this slide. The constitutional offices are not part of the consolidation. There are some cabinet agencies such as Housing Finance and the Met Council. So if the legislature believes that consolidation should apply to some of these other agencies that are excluded, there is room in the statutes to have greater clarity. In addition, our report says that the division of IT responsibilities between MNIT and state agencies for IT services is not always clear. This partly reflects clarity in the statute, but it can also reflect the extent to which MNIT and the agencies it serves have reached an understanding about who's responsible for various tasks. Again, in our survey of agencies, a majority of cabinet agencies said that overall, and we asked both about specific tasks and asked for an overall understanding about division of responsibilities, but overall they said a majority of the non-cabinet agencies said that they are not clear or only somewhat clear about the division of responsibilities. The cabinet agencies were, again, somewhat more positive. Examples of areas in which agencies tended to express concerns about the lack of clarity included who determines the overall size of an agency's IT budget, or how will that budget be spent, and who makes key decisions related to software development. MNIT has had some opportunities to clarify responsibilities through what are called service level agreements. It has an agreement with each agency that was subject to consolidation. But one of the things that we point out is that until recently, most agencies chose not to sign those agreements, so they were not binding. Also, the agreements have left quite a few unanswered questions. For example, the agreements barely address the issue of responsibility for software applications. As you've seen in prior slides, we surveyed agencies that were subject to consolidation, and we did this partly to gauge their satisfaction with MNIT services. Again, keep in mind, MNIT is an internal service agency of state government. It provides services for the benefit of other agencies, so we think it's important to know what the customers think. And there are a number of areas in which most state agencies expressed satisfaction. First, information security. A large majority of agencies told us they are satisfied with MNIT's efforts to protect state information and websites from external threats. In addition, most agencies said they're satisfied with the quality of the so-called enterprise services MNIT provides. Again, these are services that are provided in common to most agencies. Things like having a network in place, having laptop or desktop computers for staff, or having email services throughout state government. Further, most state agencies said they're satisfied with the quality of agency-specific services they either receive from MNIT directly or from MNIT contractors. That would include things like software development that's needed by a particular agency to meet its business needs. But we also heard about quite a few areas in which agencies are less satisfied with MNIT services. For example, many agencies, particularly the non-cabinet agencies, said MNIT does not understand their business needs. About half of all agencies expressed dissatisfaction with the customer support they receive from MNIT, for example, related to the timeliness of MNIT's responses to requests for service or the extent of communication MNIT provides related to those requests. A majority of agencies told us they have been dissatisfied with the cost of MNIT's enterprise services. Having said that, I will say that MNIT has commissioned a couple of studies that have done some comparisons between MNIT's costs and those of public and private organizations, and for the most part, MNIT's costs compare favorably. But many state agencies, again, express concerns about cost, and that may, to some degree, reflect the fact that many also said they don't have a good understanding of what is included in the rates that they're paying for enterprise services. Many agencies expressed concern about the IT billing and procurement processes. They said they spend a lot of time on these and that the bills can be hard to interpret. And agencies express concern about information they get from MNIT that affects their budget proposals. Many said they get information on MNIT's enterprise rates at a very late stage of the budget process, too late in some cases to be reflected in the budget request that they submit to MMB. Next, I want to turn to MNIT's oversight of software application projects. We gave you a little preview of our findings a couple weeks ago. In our view, MNIT has not yet taken sufficient steps to improve its central office oversight of these projects, which are sometimes large and risky. MNIT has adopted few central policies related to software development. For example, it doesn't have requirements for development of a test plan or the levels of testing that should be done. MNIT provides little guidance, and it doesn't have a how-to guide for agencies that are undertaking these projects. Agencies are partners in these projects, and it's important for them to understand their roles. We identify a number of areas in which MNIT has not complied with requirements in statute. For example, the MNIT Commissioner does not approve each IT project as required by statute. Our 2018 financial audit showed inadequate monitoring of Odyssey Fund projects. MNIT has not developed adequate standards for things like the system design for IT projects and for external project audits. And in addition, from our reviews of the MNLARS project, we observed that MNIT has not been conducting evaluations of its contractors in recent years, which are required by law. We do think that, and acknowledge in the report, that MNIT has undertaken some steps in recent months to improve its central oversight of projects. The MNIT Executive Steering Team now receives regular updates regarding projects that have been placed on what's called a watch list. They're there because they're high profile or high risk typically. Also, MNIT has been changing the process by which outside contractors conduct reviews of large projects. and Minut's goal has been to bring greater consistency to that project and a greater capacity when necessary to look at technical issues in those projects. But I would say that it's too early at this stage to evaluate the impact of those actions. And while those are important by themselves, they are not adequate to ensure sufficient oversight and direction of IT projects. So there is more work to be done. Our report raises a number of accountability issues. Some of the statutes governing Minute are outdated. You might assume that the statutes were already written in 2011 when the consolidation was mandated. But in fact, many of Minute statutes predate the consolidation by many years or even decades. Some of Minute statutes are overly broad, and this may reflect, or may affect, I should say, the ability to hold Minute accountable for reasonable results. For example, the statutes direct Minute to develop a master IT plan for state government and for the state's political subdivisions. We think Minute has its hands full overseeing state government IT, and it should not be expected to develop broad-scale IT planning for school districts and counties and cities throughout the state, but that's in statute. We observe that the information Minute has provided to the legislature in biennial budgets over time on its own performance has been inconsistent, and furthermore, the performance information Minute has provided to its customers, to state agencies, has been minimal, except in the area of information security. In addition, we heard mixed opinions from state agencies about their opportunities to provide Minute with feedback and on Minute's willingness to listen. Minute does have some governing bodies that include representation from state agencies, but agencies sometimes feel they have no recourse if they feel as if their concerns are not being heard. And as we said at the outset, we observe that the legislature's own oversight of state government IT has been fragmented. Legislative budget committees tend to review state agency requests in a piecemeal manner, one agency at a time. Unlike the practices in more than half of the states, there is no Minnesota Legislative Committee that is dedicated specifically to IT, either for budget or policy. And in the meantime, there are a lot of critical IT investment decisions that will face Minnesota state government in coming years. And while we don't think that the legislature needs to have its hands in all of the details about those projects, I think there's an argument for the legislature playing a strategic role in those decisions about what we should invest in or when those investments should occur. So turning to the recommendations in the report, we have a number of recommendations for the legislature, and I'll start there with the committee structure. We certainly recognize that there are a lot of things that the legislature has to consider when it creates committees or when it establishes joint committees. But we do think the legislature should consider the merits of establishing one or more technology committees to help oversee these high-level issues. As noted, the statutes are not very clear about which agencies were supposed to be part of the 2011 consolidation. Minute has provided some direction with its own policy, but we want the legislature to be aware of that there is some lack of clarity here, and if it wants to clarify that, that can be done in statute. In addition, there is considerable confusion over where Minute's boundaries for IT services end and where the agencies begin. And those clarifications could occur in various ways. Certainly statutory clarification could be part of that process of clarification. Minute, we have many recommendations for Minute specifically in the report. I'm just going to touch on a few. We think that Minute should do whatever it can to provide agencies with information on enterprise rates sooner in the budget process. As we said this past year, agencies were finding out those rates pretty late in the game. And so Minute should strive to give agencies more time to understand the rates and respond accordingly. Minute should improve its centralized oversight of IT projects, partly to comply with the law, but also to improve its ability to intervene in risky projects. And it should also be providing not just direction, but guidance to help the agencies do these projects. Minute should also improve the way it measures and reports on its own performance, and as part of that, Minute should more regularly assess agency satisfaction with performance. Minute should do more to ensure that agencies understand the services for which they're paying and that the bills that they receive are clear. For example, MNIT sometimes bundles things together in its rates, and agencies need to have a good understanding of what's included in those bundles. And MNIT should consider ways to streamline the IT procurement and billing processes and make them more transparent. We made our recommendations to MNIT under the assumption that MNIT would continue to be the state's IT agency, which is consistent with current law. But we recognize that not everyone is on board with that. Not everyone thinks MNIT should continue, at least in its current form. And that's why Chapter 7 of this report includes a discussion of options for structural changes. And the options range from, on the one hand, abolishing MNIT and moving its functions into the Department of Administration. At the other end of the continuum, increasing MNIT's authority and its funding. And in between, there are other options. Continuing to have MNIT exist as an agency, but narrowing its scope of responsibilities, or maintaining its current responsibilities, but simply having a better level of performance. We offer these options without recommendation, not unusual in our reports when we're talking about these kind of large structural changes. But in our view, the legislature should consider the merits of these options and what the appropriate direction is. And in doing so, with this final slide, we've tried to offer a framework, and we have some questions that we think the legislature should think about. How has MNIT performed over the past 7+ years? Has it made reasonable decisions and priorities? Has it demonstrated competence? If a different agency were in charge of IT, would that agency, such as the Department of Administration, do a better job? Does the legislature still have the commitment to centralized IT services that it appeared to express in the 2011 consolidation legislation? That legislation gave MNIT authority to oversee a broad range of IT services, including things like software applications. So has the legislature had some second thoughts about that? And if so, what would the implications be? Have there been reasonable expectations of MNIT, which is funded almost entirely by state agencies? In what ways have MNIT's efforts to consolidate and implement IT services and oversight been constrained by the current funding model? And finally, the state made a significant change in 2011, turning an agency of fewer than 400 employees into something much bigger and with much more authority. Would another change in the structure at this point be disruptive? And if so, would that disruption be justifiable? Some things to think about. Not all resolved within the pages of this report, but we hope this has provided some direction and some points of departure. So I'll stop there, Mr. Chairman, and see what questions you have.
Thank you, Mr. Alter. Any questions?
Well, Mr. Chair, I would really like to have MNIT respond first before questions, if that's okay, unless others have. Okay.
Okay, I do have a question for Mr. Alter. So does the Office of Legislative Auditor contract with MNIT? And then if so, what are its annual budget consequences for MNIT?
Sure, I think I'm going to see if Ms. Randall has a better answer than I do.
Mr. Chair, members, we do contract with MNIT for standard services like email. We do host our own servers. We have our own IT staff in our office that we rely on to manage our kind of day-to-day issues, manage our website, manage our servers. But we do rely on MNIT for some things. I can get you the exact budget numbers at another time, but I can tell you that we did have an adjustment to our budget numbers or our charges. They go through a process where they kind of make an assumption about what your rates are going to be, and so you pay that, and then there's kind of a settling up towards the end, and so we did get a settling up bill, I know, recently. But I can't give you the exact number here, but we can certainly get that to you pretty quickly.
I just think with transparency, it's important to have that on the record that you are a contractor with them. And with that, I do have to leave, so I'm going to turn the gavel over to Senator Cram.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if there's no further questions for, at this point for the Judy, Ms. Randall, and Mr. Alter, we'll bring up a minute. Happy birthday. Enjoy. Hope we get there sometime in the next 12 hours. Mr. Poirier, for the record, please state your name and your position.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, my name is Bill Poirier, and I'm the Acting Commissioner of MNIT and the State Chief Information Officer. I have a few prepared comments, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Poirier, go ahead.
I appreciate the opportunity to provide this response to the OLA's special review. First, let me say we agree with the OLA's findings and recommendations. The report reveals shortfalls and deficiencies that need to be recognized, addressed, and monitored on an ongoing basis. My team and I are happy to walk through the items outlined in our response letter that are both underway and plan to take action on these recommendations. As your current state CIO, I believe it's important to expound on the what happened in the OLA's report for this program evaluation by uncovering some of the why, that is, the root causes of some of the shortfalls and gaps identified in the report, and close with the way ahead. Why? It really started with the law itself. As the OLA notes in Chapter 2 of the report, and what they outlined here, when the legislature passed the IT consolidation, the language around the consolidation lacked clarity. Based on the letter of the law, MNIT could have called the job done in 2012 when the transfer of all state agency IT staff to MNIT was complete. However, based on the testimony of the bill authors and the OLA's definition in this report, the legislative intent was to reduce duplicative or redundant services and to provide a centralized provision of services when this would provide secure, high-quality services to agencies at best value to the state. And that is exactly what MNIT has been striving to achieve. We took on the unenviable task of driving forward a massive sea change in the way cybersecurity and core IT services such as networks, help desk, and workstation management are delivered to agencies across the executive branch. But the constraints have been many. From an execution standpoint, the approach was far from ideal, necessitated by the far from ideal funding model. The lack of any upfront investment in the transformation effort required an incremental approach to the build-out of new centralized enterprise services. More specifically, the appropriation of IT budget dollars to state agencies as opposed to MNIT necessitated a rates-based chargeback model for services delivered. This incremental rate-based funding approach caused two distinct problems for our customers and our execution during consolidation. First, the initially consolidated agencies had to absorb a larger piece of the initial enterprise cost pie until more agencies could be consolidated to the newly established enterprise service offerings. Second, to build out these enterprise services, our staff and resources were diverted from existing customer service operational activities to build out processes and tools for the new enterprise scale operation. As a result, customer service suffered. These necessary build-out efforts were profound and must be understood from both a technical and a people perspective. From a technical perspective, MNIT created the infrastructure, tooling, and equipment necessary to properly support an enterprise-scale operation. This required infrastructure improvements that varied across the agencies based upon how well or poorly IT was historically funded in the agency. These improvements were made at the expense of initially consolidated agencies. We established new enterprise services along with the associated service rate and billing structures needed to accommodate the chargeback model. We built HR, procurement, and financial management functions to support the consolidated organization. To date, centralized procurement has already avoided millions of dollars in costs through renegotiating individual agency contracts into enterprise contracts and high-volume computer purchases. We established new IT business processes to consistently manage IT service delivery across an array of distinct agency cultures and internal business processes. And from a people perspective, we had to do all of this with staff who were accustomed to providing IT services to a limited environment within the walls of a single agency. They were suddenly tasked with building out an enterprise-scale operation supporting dozens of agencies, and that's not trivial. The technical skills and training required for our people to build out an enterprise IT operation are very different than those required to deliver service within a local delivery model. We had to grow this capacity from scratch. In short, we are rebuilding the airplane while in flight. And not only that, we are rebuilding the airplane using only the parts and people available on board the aircraft. Even under ideal circumstances, change in IT on the scale of what we have seen the last 7 years in this state is by its nature disruptive. The loss of control inherent to the effort inevitably results in anxiety on the part of the business leadership about reductions in service level and increases in cost. And unless upfront capital is invested to stand up the enterprise fully before transition, then the incremental build-out will undoubtedly result in negative service impacts and cost increases associated with the period of build-out activity. That, at its core, is what occurred here in Minnesota. We have been building this enterprise on our customers' backs and with their goodwill. They suffered, and our reputation and brand suffered, and indirectly by default, Minnesotans suffered. As we take a step back to reflect, it's my conclusion that this was a perverse way to build a state enterprise, to grow a future workforce and pay for this transformation. I've done this multiple times in the past 10 years and would never envision this as a viable option to pursue. This report raises many important questions about the state of Minnesota, how it's undertaken IT consolidation, and how it will continue to undertake it moving forward. But as a career IT professional who has experienced several centralization efforts of similar size and scope in both the military and the private sector, I see nothing in this report that would make me question whether IT consolidation is ultimately the right thing to do. The business case for consolidation is steeped in data about the return on investment, and it is the overwhelming trend with state governments as well as large private sector companies. But make no mistake, there is much work left to do, and we should all take this report as an opportunity to assess whether how we have undertaken this consolidation has been the right approach. At this stage, we're about 2/3 of the way through the centralization of core IT, with the final wave of agencies transitioning into laptop desktop support and help desk services this upcoming biennium. Through a combination of IT business process transformation and automation, that centralization work will allow greater and greater volumes to be supported without the associated incremental increases in costs. But those benefits cannot be fully realized until the entire enterprise has been transitioned to the central service offerings. We also have much work left to mature our processes in the area of rates, budgeting, and billing. The recent implementation of Microsoft's Power BI tool is showing promise, but we must do more work with our business partners to fully leverage the power of this tool to provide greater visibility into the levers agencies have to manage their costs and services. But all the tools in the world will not eliminate the complexity involved in accommodating unique business processes and cost allocation methodologies that are employed by various federally funded state agencies. For that reason, I believe we need to explore alternative funding models that would reduce the need for rate-based chargebacks for core IT services. One example of such simplification is contained in the governor's budget recommendations, where rather than chargeback for needed investments in the areas of cybersecurity, the governor is proposing that the legislature directly appropriate dollars to MNIT to make these crucial investments on behalf of the whole executive branch. We also need to strengthen enterprise-level oversight of agency-based software development projects. As the auditor's report notes, statutory mandates related to state CIO project approval that were vested with the Office of Enterprise Technology, the precursor agency to MNIT, more than 20 years ago, were never fully implemented before IT consolidation began. These statutory mechanisms were designed to enable OET as a separate state entity to act as a check on agency project activities. And my sense is that when IT consolidation was put into law, previous leadership felt that these state CIO project approval requirements were implicitly being met by the fact that all IT project activity and spending now occurred through MNIT as opposed to the agencies. Simply put, I don't agree with this assessment. I say this because as it relates to agency-based software development, the siloed agency-based delivery structure remains today largely as it was prior to consolidation. While we have one word now to refer to state IT, I'll admit it, the de facto reality is that there are many permutations of MNIT embedded within state agencies across the executive branch, each with their own strengths and weaknesses, its own immature and mature characteristics. And the IT project priorities and budgets are determined not by MNIT, but by agency business leadership. So at a time when the state faces numerous large dollar IT system modernization efforts on the horizon in the years ahead, it is critical that a fully resourced and empowered central oversight function be put in place that acts independently from individual agency-based software project teams. And I believe the OLA's report on the rollout of MNLARS strongly underscores the need for this function. Unfortunately, the funding model that was employed through the IT consolidation initiative does not enable investments to be made that would support this increased oversight without diverting existing agency resources from their unique project priorities. That is why MNIT is proposing direct appropriation of the funds for such an oversight entity to ensure that the next MNLARS is headed off at the pass before the damage of a botched rollout is done. We also need to put a renewed focus on customer service, particularly for our non-cabinet agency customers. The experience of relatively small state agencies and boards serves as a concentrated microcosm of the challenges that are faced more broadly across the executive branch during the IT consolidation process. Non-cabinet agencies have historically operated with very limited budgets. In many cases, they operated at high-risk levels by relying on outdated equipment supported by IT generalists who split time between maintaining in-office servers and applications, performing help desk duties, or managing the agency's local area network. In some cases, these staffs were also splitting time between IT work and frontline agency business activities. Under IT consolidation, these agencies were transitioned to a rate-based service model where each of these services is delivered by a unique service line staffed by specialists as opposed to generalists. This resulted in significant improvements in security and reliability, but it came at a cost these agencies struggled to afford. And while they had hoped IT consolidation would bring an enhanced level of engagement and support from the state's larger community of IT professionals, the pay-by-the-drink funding model significantly limited MNIT's ability to provide that kind of tailored support. And unlike cabinet agencies who have dedicated MNIT staff in their offices, most non-cabinet agencies do not. This further hampered these agencies' abilities to understand the security, efficiency, and reliability gains that were associated with the increased cost of enterprise services. It also made it more difficult for them to provide input and have visibility into MNIT's decision-making. Lastly, the lack of dedicated MNIT staff made it more difficult for MNIT to have a nuanced understanding of their unique business needs. I believe this reality underscores the significant difference in satisfaction levels between cabinet and non-cabinet agencies that the OLA uncovered. And with 73% of the OLA survey respondents representing non-cabinet agencies, these facts should be understood as a helpful context as you review the OLA's overall survey findings. All that said, Recognizing the funding reality, it remains Minut's responsibility to establish other mechanisms for agencies who lack dedicated Minute staff to get their voices heard and impact the decisions Minute is making on behalf of the enterprise as a whole. In my 8 months at the state of Minnesota, I have seen firsthand, time and again, the exceptional level of commitment displayed by Minute staff who have been working in spite of these challenges to achieve the true intent of this legislative body through the IT consolidation law. That is why it troubles me deeply to hear the capabilities of these staff drawn into question, seemingly without recognition of the complexity and enormity of the task put before them, or the time and resources that would be required to get the job done right. When I started at the state in June of 2018 as Minute's Chief Technology Officer, I soon adopted a mantra that I use with the staff to this day. One team, one mission, one family. As we look to this report and use it to set a path forward for IT in the state of Minnesota, I hope we all can adopt a similar perspective. After all, given its fundamental role in daily business and the lives of all Minnesotans, IT is really politically agnostic. In fact, I struggle to think of a single state government function, from educating kids to managing traffic flow to apprehending criminals, that does not rely on information technology provided by Minute in partnership with the private sector. We must recognize, however, that the threats against these systems and the citizen data they house are growing at the same time as those systems are increasingly reaching end of life and risk a tipping point with no easy path forward to recovery. That is why now is the time for us to come together to extricate IT as much as possible from the realm of politics, to recognize in the end, we are all in this together, and we all collectively have work to do. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for this opportunity. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Alter, if you would like to join Mr. Poirier back at the table, and we'll take questions. Representative Quam.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And it was brought up settling up. And I guess it'd be useful to understand when discussions, especially budget-wise, happen with agencies, no matter what size, is it functioning broken out by straight fees or hourly billing?
Commissioner?
The rate that comes out of that is based upon the service that's delivered. We're not a for-profit agency, and so we simply pass on what the costs are based upon the service provided.
Representative Quam, follow-up?
Most certainly, I do have a follow-up. Having known that when agencies come to the State Gov Finance Committee in the House, and I assume also in the Senate, repeatedly they're asked, what are the IT costs? That isn't a, fuzzy. What normally happens in the outside world is that the service provider meets with the company or agency, et cetera, and says, what are your needs? So you have the communication, you size things up, and then you have an actual semi-concrete bit of information that's given to them of this is the fee, and it goes up to X number of hours. If you exceed that, there could be some additional billing. Here's what you have some good discussions. And so when the agencies come to us and they say, hey, we need this money, and we say, how much for the IT? They have a real good idea. It's sort of a failing if the communication isn't sufficient to be able to say, hey, this is it within X percent. And what I'm hearing is that clarity has not been present, and that's my experience from having the discussions with agencies and going over the budgeting. So is it a problem that Minute doesn't have internal expertise to be able to effectively communicate the budgeting size, or is it poor communication and partnering? Or is the cost and billing not clear to the agencies? I mean, something is not quite functioning the way it ought to. Either person at the table that might have some clarity they can shine on to what are the contributing factors would be useful.
Mr. Poya?
Mr. Chair, if I could, I'd like to bring up our CFO, Tu Tong, and he can lay out for us, come on up, Tu. He can lay out for us what we did from November of 2017 all the way up through October of 2018 in order to work out the rates package, the governance structure that he was under, and how it was that he parlayed that information during that budgeting process through the Financial Steering Committee, and the work that he did in his interactions with our CBTOs that are strategically placed across the state to work with the individual agencies.
Mr. Tutong, please state your name and your position for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Tu Tong. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for MNIT Services.
Mr. Tutong, go ahead.
I think the question was, are there a capacity or the ability to manage budget at the central office? And the answer is yes. We started the...
Mr. Representative Guam?
I'd like to clarify the question. The question is, in the interaction with the agencies, your customers, the communication of, the sizing, the billing, so they actually know what to come to the legislature and ask for IT support, and how that communication is ineffective. It's not how you do your global thing.
Okay.
But each agency needs to be able to know that, and as your customer, should expect that.
Mr. Tong?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Member. We started the process in November 2017, drawing out the workflow specifically within each functional areas of the rate plan. So we started out by saying to ourselves, hey, beginning of each budget cycle, we need to know what the portfolio looks like. And then once we determine the portfolio, the workflows then goes to the chief business technology officer at the agencies to request information such as volumes. The volumes and the cost and the contracts that we have all comes together to create a rate package. Now, the agencies get those volumes in for the FY 2021 rate package by utilizing something we just implemented called Power BI. The ability to drill down specifically in what they consume, what services they consume, and how that historical trend has been consumed over the last fiscal year. Our ability to do that this year by using Power BI is because we have an ability to take our portfolio, which was very granular, and package it up to we call it bundling. We are packaging it up so that people can understand what they consume. That information then is sent to our Chief Business Technology Officer. Then they are to review that with the agency's fiscal staff or other staff that are involved. That information is get back, collected, and it goes into the rate model. The rate model spins all this information and provide the unit costs associated with what we sell. This information was all packaged together, and we then push out another product, well, not another product, we push out impact analysis in the tool we call Power BI. We said, hey, this is the amount of volume you stated that you would be consuming. This is the amount of cost for these units. This is the associated cost associated with your overall of your IT expenditures. So we do have the tools, we do have the communication channel, we do have all that information pushed out to our CBTO who works directly with the business in communicating their business needs.
Mr. Chair,
Representative Guam?
maybe the person from the auditing group could give us an idea of what the accuracy and magnitude of error in the guesstimatation from the tools utilized, because this settling up or unexpected costs in multiple agencies is a little bit disconcerting since we're supposed to try and set up a budgeting.
Mr. Alter?
Mr. Chair, Representative Quam, and I should say, we didn't look at that particular aspect in terms of, what is the overall level of settling up that occurs as a part of the beginning rates. But let me just offer a couple of observations. First of all, the rate setting process, as perhaps you've gathered, is enormously complex. Large amounts of dollars, large numbers of transactions, and user levels that have to be taken into account. The primary observation that I would make is that these are amounts that do have an impact on agencies, and so it's really critical for them to get that information in a timely manner. And if we look at just this last year and the point at which the agencies got kind of a preview of what the rates might be, it was in late September of 2018, going into the early October period of 2018, and the agencies were required to have their budgets to MMB by October 15th of 2018. And I would add that at that point, the rates are not final. MNIT has to go to MMB and get the rates approved, which is another process that takes weeks and sometimes months to get done. So it's all still a little bit of a guess. And so you can imagine there's a lot of nervousness among agencies when they're seeing for the first time these impact analysis that Mr. Tong referred to in late September, early October, and they've got to have their budget in about a week. What we're suggesting, and we realize, we aren't expecting that MNIT's going to be able to provide agencies with that information in the spring of 2018. But whatever they can do to move that up forward helps to provide the transparency the agencies need and the discussions that have to take place within those agencies. So that's what I would add to this.
Mr. Chair?
Representative
Mr. Chair, if I could
Mr. Poirier.
offer just some other information too. This year was particularly tough for us because we were also bringing in the final wave of agencies for this effort. And so there was a lot of back and forth on what those volumes would be as the new agencies were trying to discover this process as a whole. So this year was particularly tough on us given this wave of agencies coming in.
Representative Quam, quick follow-up. Senator Kiffmeyer would like to get a couple questions in.
Okay, and I think this was a key point so we can do a good, did the auditors look at when you do contracts with outside vendors to do large projects, in the outside world, you're used to paying for, you get some of the money, but you don't get all the money until you give us a functional, working output. And are the contracts structured normally like that? It appears that out there you wouldn't be paying for them to fix the mistakes that they made and all the extra money that goes in. So did you have a viewpoint on that?
Mr. Chair and Representative Quam, we didn't look at individual contracts to see how they're structured, but I would make that point that's what you have to go to is each contract and the way the payment structure is laid out. I mean, if you've got a multi-year contract, it may have payments that extend over a long period of time, and those can be done in different ways. But I would just say we didn't spend time looking at exactly how those contracts were done.
Thank you, Mr. Alter. Senator Kiffmeyer, question?
Well,
Mr. Chair, may I
Mr. Tong?
follow up on Representative Quam questions about the true-up? The rate-setting process, what we set rates so that agency consume is only roughly about 1/4 to 1/3 of the overall IT budget. The 2/3 of the budget lives out at the agency, as earlier testified. And the settle up for FY18, the net effect of that is a rebate to the agency. There are some products that we under-recover, which we need to true up, and there's a significant amount that was over. We discovered this in March of 2018. We worked with the financial steering team, a recommendation that came forward to rebate the amount within the current fiscal year. So the net effect for FY18 was a significant rebate to the agency.
Thank you, Mr. Tong. Senator Kiffmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There are a lot of things that are concerning me in regards to this minute report, but probably what was a little bit more concerning was the responses in regards to the explanations of the past, and that's the problem, and that more money and more power will solve this. And I don't know that I see that in the future, but it is something that will be important to consider. There's a fair amount of meat here, Mr. Alter, a lot of detail, and as I've been reading through to do this work, and I have our staff doing so as well, but whatever it is, whether it's this rate setting, which is like way, way, way too complex, way too late, and is unfair to the agencies. These are large systems. And speaking of that, by the way, I'll just mention that I will hold a hearing on this minute report in my committee. As a committee of jurisdiction, that's a place where this needs to go and have a more where we have a little more time to prepare and have an in-depth discussion, which is part of Mr. Alter's recommendations. We'll take action on that right away. But one of the things, you have a very large agency, DHS, that is not been, I think it's been designated to be consolidated, is not yet, from what I've read in the report, it's a large portion. And yet, this is a large agency. So can you give us a status currently on DHS? And I mean currently on DHS. Is it in, is it not in consolidated?
Mr. Poya.
Mr. Chair, DHS is actually, from a services standpoint, been fully consolidated. What has not been consolidated are the financial activities that are associated with that. And the reason for that and why DHS hadn't done that.
Mr.
Senator Kiffmeyer.
Before you, when you say financial, not consolidated, could you just give a little what that is?
Right.
I don't want to go in a great level of detail here, by the way. This is just top level that I would hope that you, Mr. Poyer, could answer.
Mr. Poirier.
Okay. Do you want to?
Mr. Tong.
Mr. Chair, Senator Kiffmeyer, the DHS is the part that's non-consolidated is the financial of non-salary data. But we have consolidated salaries, services, we have consolidated services, but the non-salary is the part that has not been consolidated, as stated in the financial report.
Senator Kiffmeyer.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Tyne or Mr. Poirier. What is that financial that is not consolidated, non-salary? Are you talking about electricity, space, overhead? What are those items that are in that non-salary?
Mr. Tong.
Mr. Chair, Senator Kiffmeyer, just as you stated, Senator Kiffmeyer, those are things like software expenses, travel, training, electricity, items that are non-salary specific.
So, Mr. Tun, thank you. So when you say there, that helps, so I have an idea of what you're talking about here. So this is money that you and your minute consolidation would normally get to minute, but is not coming to minute. And how much money is that?
Mr. Tong.
Mr. Chair, Senator Kiffmeyer, in FY18, the amount was, I believe, $115 million. I think that's stated in the report as such.
So that's 150, thank you, Mr. Chair. So you have $150 million that other agencies, when they do financial consolidation as well as the other salary consolidation, so these other entities, are they both financially and salary consolidation? Are those done for other agencies for the most part?
Mr. Tong.
Mr. Chair, Senator Kiffmeyer, so other agencies, for example, when we budget for IT expenditures, we budgeted in two places. What they consume from enterprise services, what they buy from us to support their system, and then what is the budget at the agency locally. we budget all that information under our Department G46. In the case of DHS, the $115 million is not budgeted under G46. It's unbudgeted under H55.
Mr. Tun,
Senator Kiffmeyer.
you are an excellent financial person to know those numbers. It means nothing to me.
I'm sorry.
So if you can just kind of make that what most everybody in the room would understand.
Mr. John.
While we have over, Mr. Chair, Senator Kiffmeyer, we have, we do not capture that $115 million in our checkbooks, this for say, because
I appreciate that, Mr. Tun. I want to, I'm losing it because we're kind of going down the trail here. I want to go back to my question, which was very specific. So let's take Department of Corrections, which is a cabinet level or another cabinet level, whatever you want. Are both the non-salary and the salary consolidation accomplished in those agencies?
Mr. Tong.
Just a real kind of a yes or no.
Mr. Chair, Senator Kiffmeyer, yes.
Senator Kiffmeyer.
So we have a very large agency, and I believe that's about 20% or so of the total. It's a very, very large agency that 115 million, 115, which other agencies are putting into MNIT, but this $115 million is not going to MNIT. Is that a correct restatement?
Mr. Tong.
Mr. Chair, Senator Kiffmeyer, that is correct.
Senator Kiffmeyer.
Okay, I needed to have that answer to that question while we had that, and I will leave the rest of the things because I want to do a little bit more research, but this one, through reading the report, I felt really needed clarification at the get-go, and I think that's a significant an issue in and of itself. But I would say that, Mr. Poirier, I'm very much looking forward to working with you and the other commissioners, but I'm absolutely rock-solid serious that status quo is just not acceptable. And so what the view of this takes going forward in the future, I would like it to be a coordinated effort. And I'm willing to put in an extraordinary amount of time to accomplish that on behalf of the Minnesota people. I mean, that's who we all are here and who we work for. I know we all have that in our hearts, but we got to put it into real action. And there are several projects that are in the works right now that have issues as well, that have significant impact financially to the state of Minnesota in the area of health and human services, and I serve on both of those committees as well. This is critically important and has already cost the state tens of millions of dollars by not being active and in effect. So these are some very serious things, and I look forward to any meetings that you would have, but I think that it's going to take that coordinated effort. And so I want to meet that to you. And with that, Mr. Chair, I also have another meeting. And
Thank you, Senator Kiffmeyer.
sad to say.
It's not your birthday, but we wish
No.
you well. We'll also wish you
No,
well.
I take care of that over Christmas, so we're good.
Thank you, Senator Kiffmeyer.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Mr.
And I appreciate Senator Kiffmeyer's statements. We're all committed to this, and I think the status quo, and we want to know, what are we going to do differently? What are the legislative, not lenient, what are the legislative tools or modifications we need to make to actually try something new and creative in government? It's about trust in the citizens, right? Most don't know what they pay. They just don't perceive great value. When we hear these things, they hit the news, they hit the news all the time, and there'll be another story on this report. We've got to work together. All of us, our success is incumbent upon it. And it is business as usual, status quo. Every one of you who've been in my office knows where I stand on it, my commitment to it. And we are going to change government, and we would rather everybody go and participate together and willingly. I think we can. I think we got great people. But it's about the process. Representative Liebling?
Mr. Chair, thank you. I wonder if I could just make a brief comment as well.
Sure. Representative Liebling?
I've been listening and trying to follow as best I can, and I am currently chair in the House of the HHS Finance Division, and I am well aware that we're facing, not only have we had challenges, and I really appreciate Senator Kiffmeyer's line of questioning. We've had huge challenges with IT in Health and Human Services area, and we really are, in the next few years, we must do some other big projects. And so I just wanted to add my commitment here that we need to put in the work to get this straightened out. And I take from the report, from the OLA report, that we all have our part to play in this. And so I think that as members of the commission, we especially need to bring the word back to our respective committees and our respective bodies that a significant work needs to be done on all sides here. And I just look forward to working with the commissioner and, or the acting commissioner, I should say, and, you know, hope that we can make some significant progress. I just really appreciate both this presentation today and the members of the commission who've asked some very good and important questions.
Thank you, Representative Liebling. So I just have thank you, Senator Kiffmeyer. I just have a couple quick follow-up questions. So just a couple things. We've done a high-level summary, but I think, Mr. Poirier, you know, one of the things you talked about, the business case for consolidation, you know, it's clear. I think it always looks very clear until you get there. And I've seen it. This is my 37th year in government on both sides, and in government procurement and every aspect. And so I've seen it go both ways, centralization, decentralization. It's solely based on the fact that what's the perceived value of your customers, right? Not our citizens in this case, which are also your customers, but every single one of your customers. And to build a better report, to make you feel better, you know, that's great. We got to break that mold. Everybody has to practice and change the operational, functional management of our agencies to get out and walk in your customers' shoes so you know exactly what they want. And then I think we'll break the mold, and I think we'll put Minnesota in a position where we'll function like no other. And I think we can do that. Couple quick questions. One on minute resources. The one thing we didn't talk about, you talked about FTEs, but not a single mention in this report of contract staff. And so I guess I'd like to know what's the composition of what you consider in the parameters of minute. And we talked about staff and where they reside. What portion, just give me a ballpark, what portion of those are contract staff?
Yeah. Do you have a percentage of contract services versus?
No, I'll take anybody who can answer it.
Right. Right. Thanks.
Mr. Eichen?
Mr. Chair, members, for the record, my name is John Eichten, Deputy Commissioner for Minnesota IT Services. My recollection is that in fiscal year 18, and we'll follow up if I'm off the mark here, we spent about $133 million on contract staff.
Okay. Okay. So significant portion of your budget. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Eichen. And with that, then, one of the things that, and I'll just have just one more brief question, and we'll wrap it up. And so, actually, two. I take that back. Two points. One of the biggest challenges that I've heard in agency, and I think we've seen in our projects, is the procurement of the IT resources. You know, where they're come from staffing, approved staffing shops. I didn't see any mention of it in the OLA report, and I haven't heard that mentioned in either the minute, or I'm sorry, the minute, or the MNLARs, or any of our recent conversations. I hear it because I also know people in the industry that, one, they struggled to put bodies in a timely manner. We know we don't have benches sitting out there like we did 15 years ago. And so when there's a need and they have staff, it appears that it's a 60-day process. And I don't believe it's all on your agencies, but I want to know, what do you need, or what are we going to do to resolve that so we can get timely staff and to get our projects moving?
Mr. Chair, last year we hired a new HR talent acquisition chief. And it was in the early February timeframe, I believe, before I got here. One of the things that he's done is he's actually really highly leveraged social media. He actually puts videos out on LinkedIn where he talks about the positions. He talks about Minute. That has made a significant.
Mr. Poirier, I think that's great. That's recruitment. Right. I'm talking about functional administrative ineffectiveness of our government bureaucracy that allows you to once identify a need and already have a contract with the staffing shops, and to procure that resource once you have a determination of need to actually being able to select and fill a body in a time frame that, well, that body is still available. That was my point. So,
Okay.
Mr. Poyer.
Right. So, Mr. Chair, we have master contracts in place to get contract services in place. I have not heard about long duration that it takes for us to get contract services in place. I have, to get those contracts in place, that takes a little bit of time to go through the red tape that's associated with that. That said, on the FTE side, the state employee side, we have gone from about 120 days down to, I think it's somewhere around 60 days to get an employee in from the time that we actually get the job description on the street. And I attribute that to our new talent acquisition chief and his ability to reach the audiences. He goes to different conferences to really build the momentum for that.
Thank you, Mr. Poyer. I appreciate the recruitment, and I'm encouraged by that. That's probably one of the shortest time frames we have, especially in the technical field. The only other question I have, Mr. Poyer, is that, and when we look at corrective or trying to take control and to do better project management, use MNLARS only because it's fresh in everybody's mind. I've had a level of frustration, and I know we had Commissioner Clybourne in here previous to you. She can't force an agency to learn what they don't know. How do you plan to overcome that? Because that is, I don't care what we put in place. I don't care how good MNIT is. You can't force the agency to know what they don't know. And when you, and I don't expect you're going to be able to fix that. But what I would expect is that we create a process that actually identifies it and puts it where not blame, but it is blame, where it belongs. I think MNIT took an unfair share of the burden of the MNLARS failure. When we look at the true ability to overcome the obstacles, you couldn't do it. You can't create and you can't make decisions on behalf of the agency. You're not the expert. So what would you do in that position? Because we will be in that position again, Mr. Poyer.
We actually are in that position, Mr. Chair. The real challenge that we have is making sure that we have an oversight function in place that can not only monitor projects in place. I just signed a policy about project initiation this week that's been in the works for about 4 months that lays out the case of the kinds of things that the executive sponsorship, the business requirements, and all of those things. We also need primers, training, if you will, but primers in place for agencies that don't embark on significant projects on a regular basis. They may do it every 2 years, 5 years. In the case of MNLARS, it's every 20 years. And so we have a change item in the budget from the governor, and it's for about $4 million, and it's to get at that piece right there. So that is right in the center of our radar, obviously considering all that's happened with MNLARS, and then moving forward with the 350-plus projects we're monitoring.
Thank you, Mr. Poyer. And I think you know my commitment that we are working on. We need to change the functional structure of the agency so they're better prepared. That's a long-term project, but I want effective communication. We're going to have to we're going to have those heart-to-heart conversations when we get to those points where you feel that, you can't move forward. And then what are we going to do? So we can't allow that to continue and fester. We just have to address it right up front and make sure everybody's aware. So with that, Representative Quam, any additional questions?
There are many, but
I know.
not time.
All right. We appreciate everybody's participation, and with that, we have no further business before the commission. We'll adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.